I'm Cara.
And 2 weeks and 2 years later, we are once again functionally literate.
Yippee!
We are reading my wife's favorite book, The Princess Bride. Today, we are focusing on Chapter 6.
The Festivities.
The Festivities. It is a long chapter, so that's why we're only focusing on one today.
It is one of my favorite chapters in the book.
So, let's talk about it.
Chapter 6. The Festivities. How Princess Buttercup was returned to Prince Humperdink, and how she gave great dole for the loss of the man in black.
What's your favorite? What do you love about it?
Well, so just to kind of give a little bit of background, the Festivities, a little bit of a recap. In the last chapter, Buttercup discovered that Wesley was alive. They went through the fire swamp. Wesley overcame the three amigos, as it were, Inigo, Fezzik, and Vizzini, using his swordsmanship, his cunning, and his intellect, and also an immunity to iocane powder. They go through the fire swamp together, and then Buttercup decides that she cannot lose Wesley again because they are caught by Humperdink and the Count. And she can tell that it's going to come to blows, and she can't lose Wesley again, so she agrees to marry Humperdink in exchange for Wesley getting to live and go back to his ship. But of course, the Count's a dirty, rotten bastard who lies, because he's a lying liar.
Just a terrible person, really.
And we find out that the Count is the six-fingered man that killed Inigo's father. And Wesley even brings that up, saying, you have 6 fingers on your left hand, there's somebody looking for you. And he knocks out Wesley. And in this chapter, we get a lot of flashback moments to Inigo and Fezzik and Wesley waking up. And this chapter has a really wonderful fake out that it got me when I was a kid. And Goldman talks about how his dad got him with it when he was a kid. But my mom, when she read me this book, she kind of skipped over all the Goldman bits where he was like talking about stuff,
so
unless she thought it was particularly funny.
All of the italics.
Yeah, she kind of skipped over the italic bits. And she read me the stuff that's in plain text.
Okay, so when Buttercup's first dream happens, you were totally bought into that, and you were like, "Oh my God, no!"
I cried.
Oh.
I cried. I was like, "No, mommy, no, no, she wouldn't marry him. She doesn't love him." She was like, "Listen, I'm reading the story here," like literally pulling a Goldman's dad. And I was like panicking, freaking out, because I was like, there's no way this wouldn't happen. And then she was like, you're really upset. I think we should wait.
We're done for tonight.
I think we're done for tonight.
Just
and she
like
made
in the book.
me wait until the next day. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like when she read it and she was like, okay, it was just a dream. I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness. And she was like, yes, you're very smart. Just like in the movie. Because she wouldn't let me watch the movie until we read the book together. And so she's reading all of this stuff to me. And that fake out is so good. And he even talks about how good the fake out is in the italics. So the first time I read it by myself, I was like, Mom, what the fuck?
You jerk.
You jerk. But I love in this fake out, like on page 238, when he's talking about this fake out and he's in italics, he says, look, grown-ups, skip this paragraph. I'm not about to tell you this book has a tragic ending. I already said in the very first line how it was my favorite in all the world. But there's a lot of bad stuff coming up. Torture you've already been prepared for, but there's worse. There's death coming up, and you better understand, some of the wrong people die. Be ready for this. This isn't Curious George uses a potty. Nobody warned me, and it was my own fault. You'll see what I mean in a little. And that was my mistake, so I'm not letting it happen to you. The wrong people die, some of them, and the reason is this. Life is not fair. Forget all the garbage your parents put out. Remember Morgenstern. You'll be a lot happier. Okay, enough. Back to the next nightmare time. Like, I love that paragraph.
I do too. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to bring it up if you hadn't. Like, just directly speaking to the children in the audience, like, look, this is the realities of life. Like, this is a story, but this is also the realities of life. Look, sometimes Sometimes people die that shouldn't.
As a teacher, this is something I say. Like, I do like to quote The Princess Bride a lot when I teach, because I teach middle schoolers who are they are so obsessed with the idea of justice.
In the past 2 years, my wife became a teacher.
Yeah, so I teach theater, and I teach middle schoolers. I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they are so obsessed with the idea of justice and things being fair. And I constantly hear, "That's not fair," in my classroom. And I say, well, who told you life was fair? Where is that written? Like, I quote that line from the movie, but this is just so good. I do have it like written up on my board. Remember Morgenstern, you'll be a lot happier. Like, I have that written on my chalkboard. And none of my kids know who Morgenstern is, but they'll be like, "Who's Morgenstern?" And I'll be like, "The greatest writer in the world. You've never heard of S.S. Morgenstern? Like, you've never heard of him? Oh my God, he's a classic author." And so, forget all the garbage your parents put out. Remember Morgenstern, you'll be a lot happier. That is something I like live my life by. I try to live my life remembering Morgenstern, because it's such a good sentiment to give to children.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't treat them with kid gloves. He's like, "Hey, I wish I had been warned. I'm telling you now, the wrong people are going to die."
Yeah.
And my mom did not give me that warning. So when Wesley does, like, when they do bring in the machine and they start torturing him, I panicked.
That machine.
Oh my God, that machine.
The whole torture sequence was interesting, right? Because, like, at first, Wesley's fine. Wesley has figured out how to take his brain away and just to fantasize about being with Buttercup, and his body is tortured, but he is fine. Like, they burn his hands and his arms.
Yeah.
With
oil. They burn his hands, they burn his arms with oil.
Yeah. But he's fine. He's pretending to be tortured.
Yeah.
He's not really being tortured, which Humperdink buys into it. But the Count does not.
Yeah, on page 260.
Yeah.
He says, "You've been taking your brain away. You haven't felt the least discomfort in all these months. You raise your eyes and drop your eyelids, and then you're off, probably with, I don't know, her, most likely. Good night now. Try to sleep. I doubt you'll be able to. Anticipation, remember?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the machine I thought was interesting, because my only reference was, like, the movie. And correct me if I'm wrong, in the movie, there were suction cups, but not nearly as many, and they were just, like, on his nipples or something.
So,
right?
They were all along his torso.
Uh-huh.
They were much bigger. You gotta keep in mind, this is the 80s they're talking about.
Yeah.
And yes, Rob Reiner is the Max Reiner's son, but he wasn't given, like, a ton of money to do this movie. This movie was a passion project for him. Like, it was a passion project for him and Goldman, because at the beginning of the book, when he's talking about, like, the green lighting going everywhere, like, that was real. Like, it took forever to get this movie off the ground. Like, it was in constant workarounds. It was in constant rotation. Like, that part was, like, maybe a little bit exaggerated, but it was real. It took forever for them to get a movie of this, because everybody thought that it wouldn't take off. And I mean, they were technically right, because it did not do well at the box office. No. But it has soared since then.
Yeah, it was VCR tape releases that made it a cult classic.
Yeah, I showed this movie last semester when I did my stage combat unit with my 8th graders. After we finished our sword work, I showed them this movie because there's so much technique.
And did you show them the whole movie or just that one sword fighting
I showed them
scene?
the whole movie.
The whole movie.
One does not simply show a clip of the Princess Bride. One shows the whole Princess Bride. And at first my kids like complained about the quality. They were like, "Oh, it's so old. Oh, this is so corny." But by the end, they were like, "Oh my goodness. Hello, sir with bass. Your penis is very large."
Just for context, we're pretty sure what's happening is someone drove past the studio just going all bass. They're gone now. What were we talking about?
We were talking about the machine.
The machine.
8th graders. My 8th graders at first did not like this movie because they were like, "Oh, this is really corny." But by the end, they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. That was crazy. It had everything." And I was like, "You're welcome."
It did have everything.
You're welcome. And they were like, "Can we watch it again?" And I was like, "Later on, at the end of the semester, we can watch it again." And we did. And they loved it just as much the first time as they did the second time as they did the first time. They were like, "Oh, this movie never gets old." And I was like, "I know." It's amazing. But going back to the machine with the suction cups and everything, they're over his nipples, but like there's like 4 of them on each side of his torso. So there's like, they're making like a line, and I think they had some like along his arms, but the main ones are like on his torso, because you got to get that sweet Carrie Elwes torso exposed, right? Like this is peak Carrie Elwes, which happy belated birthday, Carrie Elwes.
How old is he now?
He's like 60
Okay.
now.
All right. I thought he was 61.
He might be 61.
Whatever. He had a birthday recently.
He had a birthday recently. Congrats to him. He's great.
Recently for us, you will be hearing this sometime in, November, December?
Who's to say? Whenever Ryan decides in his infinite wisdom to release the episodes.
So, in the book, though, like, it describes how every part of his skin is like has suction cups over him, and then like inside him as well. It talks about just his mouth, but it says like a bunch of suction cups were put inside him as well. And like I was just like, I don't know, left to my own imagination, I was like, oh my god, I hope the Count didn't put any like
up his ass.
Yeah. Like,
I don't think Goldman was going with that. When I heard inside of him, I thought like along the inside of his mouth.
It described like on the top and bottom of his tongue.
Yeah, and then like
maybe inside his cheeks or something.
Inside of his cheeks, maybe like sticking one down his throat.
Ugh.
Like, I don't know. I also hope we can't ask him because he's passed away. But Goldman, please, like, tell me you didn't
like have the Count
put it up his ass.
Please.
I hate that you put this image in my head, Ryan.
I don't know, man. That's just how
6 years of marriage and you're still finding ways.
2 years of marriage.
6 years together.
Yes.
2 years of marriage.
But yeah, so Wesley is not at all concerned. Like he's pretending to be concerned. He's pretending to be anticipating this. Like, he was left for a whole night and a day to, like, look at this machine that the Count assembled. But then, as you said, like, he just left it there, like, the anticipation is part of it. Because the Count, he's very methodical about his torture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is not seeking to kill Wesley. He feels that there is a science of research to torture. And he is taking a bunch of notes the whole time that he's torturing Wesley. So the first time he uses this fucking machine, there's like 20 settings. He sets it to 1, right? Because his plan is to like test every setting. And Wesley's like, okay, I'm going to just take my brain away again. And it doesn't work this time.
Nope,
it can't work this time because it's inside him too. It's torturing his brain as well as his body. And that's it. It's just awful. It's just it really like, without getting too descriptive about it, really does paint just an awful picture about what's happening to him.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, there's also, like, what's going on with Buttercup, and what's going on with Fezzik, and what's going on with Inigo.
So, poor Buttercup.
Yeah.
Like, with her nightmares are so descriptive. And I feel like she is being so hard on herself, because
she's being really hard on herself.
The nightmare about, like, the woman screaming at her. The first nightmare where the old woman screams at her after they're married and says, and how she threw away she threw love away to be the queen of grime. She had love in her hand and dropped it like garbage. She threw it away for gold. Yeah. Like, she didn't throw it away for gold.
She didn't. She did it to keep Wesley alive.
She did it to keep Wesley alive. Yeah. And to me, that is like, it is, yes, love triumphs over all. We know this. Like, having the hindsight in mind, we have the end of the book. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen The Princess Bride.
Or read The
Princess Bride. Like, Wesley and Buttercup are going to end up together. Like, spoiler alert.
That's kind of the point.
I'm sorry. I know it came out in the 70s. It's now 2024. You've had 54 years. Like, damn. Like, oh well. Womp womp.
Circling back to the
dream. Like, I just think she did something so incredibly selfless. Like, she
But
finally had him back in her grasp.
But she's torturing herself.
But she's torturing herself
Yeah.
for not letting him fight all of these people to the death that surely would have killed him.
Yeah, maybe.
She straight up was like, I cannot bear to lose you again. I already lost you once. You were already dead to me once. I cannot have it a second time.
Personally, I feel like, I don't know. I think Wesley maybe could have done it. I think Buttercup made this choice out of love for him because she was afraid that he would die.
Yeah.
But I think he could have done it. But then, same thing the next night. She dreams that she has a baby boy or something.
Who's like, oh, yeah. And it's
refuses to get near her.
a girl. She had a beautiful girl.
Oh, okay.
She refuses to nurse.
Right.
The daughter refuses to nurse because she says, I'm sorry it wasn't a boy. I know you needed an heir.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, just look at the glorious child God has given us. And then he leaves and she tries to nurse her. And the baby says, your milk is sour.
Yeah.
No, this is sour too. And she's like, you always know what to do. You always know exactly what to do. You always do exactly what's right for you. And the rest of the world can go hang.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm dying now. There's no love in your milk. Your milk has killed me. And then the child, like, turns to dust in her hands.
Ugh.
And it's like, this poor woman.
Horrible nightmare.
This poor woman.
I was thinking of the third nightmare. Is when she
has a boy.
She has a boy. And the boy just says all this horrible shit
I don't want to
her.
see him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. He says, tell him I am his mother and I am the queen and I command his presence. And he asks, are you going to kill me too? And he blames her for killing Wesley and calls her a murderer.
Yeah.
And then he dies in her arms. And she has nightmares like this every day.
For 3 months.
For 3 months.
Well, no. Sorry. After the first month is when the nightmares began. So for 2 months.
For 2 months. After the first month is when the nightmares began.
So this chapter, the festivities, there were, and this is what's cut out of the abridgment.
Mm-hmm.
There was 90 days of festivities. Every day was just a bunch of partying and eating and dancing and meeting a whole bunch of people that Buttercup doesn't give a shit about. All of that's cut. Mm-hmm. None of that crap matters. That's not the good bits.
Yeah.
So.
And then the next dream she has is her being born. And she dreams that, like, her parents kill her because she has no heart.
Yeah.
Like, the midwife says she has no heart.
Mm-hmm.
And this poor woman.
So she goes
poor woman.
She goes to Humperdink and she's like, look, here's the deal. We've got 50 more days until our wedding. If you tell me that I must go another day like this, I will die.
She says, I mean this now too. If you say I must marry you in 50 days, I will be dead by morning.
Yeah. And so Humperdink, he puts on these airs of caring. And he's like, tell me what's wrong. Tell me what's happening.
This part fucked me up.
I'll bet it did.
When I realized, because, when I was a kid.
He's so convincing. I know what's happening.
He was so convincing. Like, he was so convincing. And, you got little baby Cara here, who's just 3. And she's like, oh, like, maybe they can be friends. Like, maybe they can be friends, and he can be like Uncle Humperdink, and that would be so cool.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't that be nice? No. And then after she, like, makes this plan with him to, like, write to Wesley and have his 4 fastest ships sail to deliver the letters, when he says, it's on page 244. There is no doubt whatsoever in his mind that he was going to seem too fond of her in the days ahead, because when she died of murder on their wedding night, it was crucial that all Florin realize the depth of his love, the epochal size of his loss. And since then, no one would dare hesitate to follow him in the revenge war he was to launch against Gilder.
Yeah.
And then he reveals that he's the one who hired Vizzini and Inigo and Fezzik to kill her.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, when my mom read that part, I was like,
3-year-old Cara.
What?
So the part that you're missing is Cara doing this mouth movement like a shock, like open, close, open, close, open. What?
No, Mommy did it. And she was like, I know.
Yeah.
He did.
He did.
And I was like, but he seems so nice right now. And
sure
she was
does.
like, listen to me. This is a very important lesson. I want you listening. And I was like, I'm listening. And she was like, men lie.
Men lie.
And I took that with me for the rest of my life. I said,
men lie.
I said, men ain't shit. If you listen to the King Arthur episode that I appeared in,
Men ain't shit.
Men ain't shit.
Men ain't
Especially ballin'. Fuck ballin'. All my homies hate ballin'.
Damn. No, I mean, it's true, though. Like, some men out there, like, they just will say and do whatever they need to do to get what they want. And Humperdink, right now, what he wants is to strangle Buttercup the night of their wedding, pretend somebody else did it, blame the Gilders for doing it, and then go to war with Gilder. Because that's what he's wanted this whole time, is just to go to war with Gilder.
Yeah, because, he wants to go to war.
Yeah.
He wants a lightsaber.
He just...
War.
What are you quoting right now?
I want to go to war.
What are you quoting?
I don't even know.
You mentioned a lightsaber.
I think it's like a TikTok thing.
Okay. Fucking TikTok.
Fucking TikTok.
Anyways.
So, yeah, and that very night, the Count is like, hey, bitch, time to torture Wesley.
Yeah.
And the prince sits, like, asking him questions like, hey, who hired you to kidnap the princess?
Yeah.
Who did it? Which he fucking knows. He knows that Wesley's not the one who kidnapped the princess.
Yeah.
He's just being a fucking dick.
And Wesley tells the truth the whole time. Nobody hired me.
Nobody hired me, I
Nobody
swear.
hired me.
No one on my life.
Yeah. And this was the normal torture.
This was a normal torture where they, like, cover him in oil and
Yeah.
they hold a candle up to his skin.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
I've seen Saw. I've seen traps like that. I'm
I
pretty
refuse to
sure
watch
that
that
the
movie.
writers of Saw read that scene and said, oh, word? Bet.
I'm not watching that franchise ever. Ever.
I'm pretty, like, the writers of Saw, I know that you're alive. Answer my question. Did you read this scene in The Princess Bride and then go, oh, word? And write a whole movie franchise inspired by it? Is that what you did? I feel like that's what you did. But anyway, like...
let's see. Fezzik.
Okay, so Fezzik, I need to talk about a line because I love the idea, and it's really silly, but I feel like this line in the book, like, solidifies it. Like, I feel like there is more to Fezzik and Inigo's, like, relationship than, like, I feel like they're brothers, and it's because it says, he calls himself his Fezzik. He says, I'm here, Inigo, it's your Fezzik. Like,
Aww.
oh my god.
Yeah.
The devotion that Fezzik displays to Inigo. I love that, man.
So Fezzik, he wakes up where Wesley left him, and he's like, well, damn. And then he goes and he finds Vizzini's body.
And he's like, oh, you're napping.
And then he kind of like nudges him a bit, and he's like, oh, shoot, you're dead.
I see. He says, oh, I see you're dead.
And so...
Just...
So then he tries to remember the rhyme that Inigo taught him, which was, what was it? Because I'm also bad at this.
It's a fool. Hold on, I have it. Fool, back to the beginning is the rule.
Right. But he couldn't remember that rhyme, so he was just like coming up with a bunch of different rhymes. Yeah. And he could not remember.
Dunce, use your brain and do it right for once is one.
Uh-huh. And I think one was dummy.
Where is it? Dummy, go out now and fill your tummy.
Right. And he's like, that's not right either.
Stupid, go and wait for Vizzini with Cupid.
So I think that's what he ultimately did.
No.
This episode is not brought to you by...
Mulholland Jen by Walton Goggins. Because he's busy doing Walton Goggins shit. Like... being hot as hell, and filming The White Lotus. And also, he should be filming our next season of Fallout. And also, move the glass, Walton.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
In case you couldn't notice, we don't have any sponsors. We'd really like to have some, but at the moment we don't. So
Walton,
if you'd...
call me.
Yeah, Walton, call us. That'd be great. Do you like books? You like books, Walton?
You like books, Walton? You like jazz?
If you'd like to support us, there are ways to do that. If you have a product that you'd like us to sponsor, you can email us at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is func.lit.pod
@gmail.com. As an individual, you can, support us on Patreon, or you can make a one-time donation on PayPal. All the links for all of that crap is in the description. Back to the show. If that ad break seemed oddly out of place to you, it's because we had some technical difficulties. Our SD card failed, but fortunately we caught it only a few minutes after talking into the ether. So I believe where we left off before you lost us was we were talking about Fezzik and Inigo. And how Inigo had fallen off the deep end. He had fallen off that, he fell off the wagon, and he fell off hard. He he lost to Wesley, and so in his mind, he peaked. He peaked at that point. It was all downhill from there. He was going to just get worse and worse, so he, after not drinking for who knows how many years, started all of the drinking.
Yes.
He went to the thieves' quarters and just started drinking and drinking and drinking.
He says,
and drinking.
I have money enough for brandy. What else do I need?
Yes, he found his
He's
home.
Like,
he
buddy.
found his home on a stoop, and he did not move from it.
Yeah. Which, that ties us back into the Buttercup Wesley plot. That ties them back in, because my homie Yellen, the chief of all enforcement.
So his name is Yellen without the G. Yellen. Yeah.
Which, I love Yellen.
Yellen is a lackey's lackey.
He is. He really is. Humperdink tells him, hey, there are men from Gilder in the thieves' quarter. I'm worried about it. And Yellen says, but I haven't heard any of this.
Right.
A princess spies everywhere. I understand. And you think, since the evidence points that they tried to kidnap your fiancé once, that such a thing might happen again? And he says, I'll close the thieves' quarter then. And the prince says, nah, I want it emptied. I want every villain jailed until I'm safely on my honeymoon.
It's not good enough. I need them all out of here. And so Yellen's like, okay. And so he spends a week
forming a brute squad.
And then once he's done that, there's only like 3 days left until the wedding. Is that right?
So it says it takes a week. 12 days before his wedding day, he had neglected to set in motion the crucial Gilder section of his plan, so he called Yellen to the castle late one night. So they have this conversation 12 days, and then
so he has 5 days.
But once he agrees to form the brute squad, the scream begins.
The scream. Oh, right. Yeah. So
the scream.
So Count Rugen was testing his machine on an animal. He killed, what was it, a dog?
A wild dog.
Dog.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, what the fuck was that? And, nobody knows what it was. Except for Count Rugen, who tells Humperdink, like, the machine is ready. And so then, they take the machine down there. But I thought this interaction between the Count and Humperdink was funny, because Humperdink was like, I'm kind of, in his mind, he was like, I'm kind of bored with the torturing. Like, I'm not really.
He calls him Ty. I love it.
He's like, hey, listen, Ty, you got this. You can, I trust you. Like, I think that you can handle the torturing thing. Like, why don't you take care of it? And Count Rugen's like, oh, sure. And I just think it's funny because in Humperdinck's mind, like, he doesn't want to offend the Count. But in the Count's mind, he's like, oh, good. Finally, I can do this without, like, the prince, like, over my shoulder.
Yeah. It's so funny.
And then we get to the whole thing with the machine.
One of my favorite quotes is, I can't keep my head above water 1 minute to the next. It's not just the parties and the goo-gooing with what's her name. I've got to decide how long the 500th anniversary parade is going to be, and where does it start, and where does it start. Which noble gets to march in front of which other nobleman so that everyone's still speaking to me at the end of it. Plus, I've got a wife to murder and a country to frame for it. Plus, I've got to get the war going once that's all happened, and all this stuff I've got to do myself. Here's what it all comes down to. I'm just swamped, Ty. So how about if you go work on Wesley and tell me how it goes? When I get the time, I'll come watch, and I'm sure it'll be wonderful. But for now, what I'd like is a little breathing room. Like, he says it so matter-of-factly.
Yeah.
And this really just goes, Chris Sarandon's performance as Humperdink is absolutely phenomenal in this movie.
Yeah.
Because he gets, like, they don't have him do this whole thing. He's just like, listen, Tyrone, I love watching you work. and it's just so good. Because he's like, I'm simply swamped. And then the Count pats his cheek and is like, you must rest. You've got nothing if you haven't got your health. And it's just so good. It's just so good.
It is very good.
It's just so good. It's such a good performance. And I think that's one of the reasons why this book is so good, because he's not afraid to play with dialogue and with tone like this, because it's just so chef's kiss. Like, and the
Something
fact
we
that he
could all
calls
learn
him
from.
Ty, like, there are people in this fandom to this day that are like, I ship the Count and Prince Humperdink. They're the ultimate couple.
What, because Humperdink has an affectionate name for the Count?
Yes. And you know what? I buy it.
Okay.
That's the real tragedy of this story. The Count and Prince Humperdink.
Didn't realize their love for each other and just
didn't realize their
get
love
married
for
and
each other.
fucked off rather than causing all this drama.
Rather than being evil shitheads. They should have just gotten married and fucked off.
So it's 5 days before the wedding. Yellen has assembled his brute squad. Oh, is there something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, Yellen Wesley would never cry except for the death of a loved one. I do love that the Count talks to Buttercup 12 days before the wedding after she's like, has he written back yet? And he's like, my dulcet darling, plenty of time. Because he's a fucking liar.
Yeah.
And then the Count, like, asks her about Wesley. He's like, I don't know your fellow well, but he impressed me greatly. Any man who can find his way through the fire swamp can find his way to Florin Castle before your wedding day. He seemed so strong, so remarkably powerful. I only wondered if he possessed true sensitivity, as some men of great might, as you know, do not. For example, I wonder, is he capable of tears? And Buttercup says Wesley would never cry, except for the death of a loved one.
He would never cry.
And then he's like, and the Count's like, all right, bet. Like, oh,
I'm
word?
gonna make him fucking cry.
I'm gonna make this bitch cry.
And he
word?
did.
And he did make him cry, because he's a fucking evil shithead.
Yeah. Now, remind me, was it here or was it later when Buttercup realizes the truth?
It's later.
Okay, so
it's later because they have this thing where they're explaining the torture, and he's talking about the torture and the machine.
Earlier on, Humperdink said to Buttercup when he was being a shoulder for her, he said, why don't you write him a letter and I'll make copies of it and I will send 4 of my ships out in every direction to find Wesley and provide him the letter, and if he loves you, then you can go be with him, but if he doesn't, then you can still marry me.
Yeah.
And he didn't fucking do that. But he just fucking
shithead.
went on with this charade. She would come to him this letter's not quite right. What do you think?
And he'd be like, oh, well, let's look at our words, darling. And
yeah.
I'm just like, oh my god.
But then
evil fucking shithead.
But then days before the wedding, all right? We've got Yellen and his brute squad clearing out the thieves' quarters. There was this interaction Yellen had with the, I don't know, I guess the kingpin of crime here in Humperdink City. Yellen was getting paid off by this guy for 20 years to not arrest him.
My favorite line. He always avoided arrest, and everybody except Yellen thought Falkbridge must be bribing somebody. Yellen knew he was bribing somebody, since every month, rain or shine, Falkbridge came to Yellen's house and gave him a satchel full of money. And I'm like, get that fucking bag, Yellen!
There's just this funny thing where Yellen is getting Falkbridge, and Falkbridge is just appalled. What good is the bribery if, just because Humperdink puts on a little extra pressure, now you're gonna arrest me?
Yeah, I've been paying you 20 years to stay out of jail. You're a rich man just so I don't have to go to jail. What's the logic of me paying you and no advantages? And he says, I'll get you the best cell in Florin City. And he says, don't you trust me? How can I trust a man I paid 20 years to stay out of jail when all of a sudden, the minute a little extra pressure's on, he says, go to jail. I'm not going. I'm like, God, I love you, Falkbridge.
Yeah.
He's so funny.
But he does wind up going, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does end up going.
And then
Falkbridge was starting to explain when the noisy one clubbed him across the neck.
Yeah.
The noisy one picked up Falkbridge and tried dusting off his clothes.
So Yellen then, like, he's like, okay, that's it. We've got everyone, right? And then one of his lackeys is like, no, actually. There was a drunk. We were trying to get rid of him, but it just wasn't working out too well. And then Yellen is like, nope, we can't leave any of them.
Mm-hmm. and it's Inigo. It's Inigo.
It's Inigo, yeah.
And so
even drunk, he can still kick people's
favorite
ass.
Thing. And I am very passionate, Vizzini, and you are nothing but a tardy Sicilian. Is what he says, because he's yelling on the stoop because he's absolutely plastered.
Mm-hmm.
And he's yelling about, I'm getting bored, Vizzini.
Mm-hmm.
3 months is a long time to wait, especially for a passionate Spaniard, which this is something that's really interesting because in the movie, they don't say how much time transpires between the fire swamp
watching the movie, it almost
and
feels like
the
a
wedding.
long weekend.
It almost feels like a weekend at Bernie's kind of situation, or like spring break. Almost like spring break!
Yeah.
Like a wild week. But he is like, he yells and he's like, so if you're not here in 90 more days, I'm done with you. You hear? Done. Which means he's like prepared to wait another 3 months. I
mean, he's getting drunk on that stoop, man.
He said, I don't mean that, Vizzini. I just love my filthy stoop. Take your time. Just like, and he goes, you're such a mess. But God, I love it. It's so funny because he's just like, I don't mean it.
And
I'm just kidding.
So it's
I'll call you a tardy Sicilian.
It's around this time that things start to pick up because, oh, right. So what happens is Yellen is like, oh, I don't care about a drunk. And then he goes back to Humperdink and says, we've cleared everybody out except for one guy. He's just some drunk. And as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, does he go to Humperdink and he's like, there's just one guy left?
No. So someone comes to Yellen and they're like, there's just one guy left. And he has, he tells the noisy one to go get the fencer. He says the noisy brute, which he's referred to as the noisy brute.
It's Fezzik.
And it's Fezzik. And we don't find that out because he says, ho there, friend. And there's another brute behind him. Like there's two noisy brutes. And there's a quiet one and the noisy one. And the noisy one is not Fezzik.
Oh.
The quiet one is Fezzik.
Oh, okay.
Because the quiet one starts making rhymes. Because he says, I'm waiting for Vizzini. Meanie. I'm not mean. I'm just following the rule. Cruel. Not cruel, not mean. Can't you understand? I'm Fezzik?
Yeah.
Who's Fezzik? Fezzik? Is that a joke you just made? Played. Fezzik, it's you.
Yeah.
True. And then the noisy one's like, hold him up. Hold him, because he goes to hug him.
Yeah.
And the brute, and then we hear a splat.
The noisy one is down.
And the noisy one gets put in the wagon.
Yeah.
And so Fezzik ends up taking care of Inigo. Oh, my heart. He takes care of Inigo.
And so it's around this time when Yellen is reporting to Humperdink, and Humperdink is like, hey, how many men do we have guarding the front gate? 20. I need 80 more. I need 100 men guarding the front gate. And I need you to get all of the ships gathered in port. And then Buttercup is there, and she's like, all but 4. And then he, like, pauses, and he blinks, and he's like, yes, of course, all but 4. But like that pause and that blink was all Buttercup needed to know the truth, which was that Humperdink is a dirty liar and he didn't do shit. And then she confronts him about it after Yellen leaves. Like, what is it that she says? I mean, she proclaims her love for Wesley.
Every ship
in this
but
moment.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
after Yellen leaves,
the 4 ships were never sent. Don't bother lying to me anymore. And he says, whatever was done for your own good, sweet pudding. Somehow I do not think so. We're getting married tomorrow. I have a right to be nervous. Like, they're talking about nervous. You couldn't be more wrong, you know. I'm very calm. It doesn't matter whether you send the ships or not. Wesley will come for me. There is a God, I know that. And there is love, I know that too. So Wesley will save me. And then he says, you're a silly girl. Now go to your room. Yes, I am a silly girl. And yes, again, I will go to my room. And you are a coward with a heart filled with nothing but fear. The prince had to laugh. The greatest hunter in the world. And you say, I am a coward? I do indeed. I'm getting much smarter as I age. I say you are a coward. and you are. I think you hunt only to reassure yourself that you are not what you are, the weakest thing that will ever walk the earth. He will come for me, and then we will be gone, and you will be helpless for all your hunting, because Wesley and I are joined by the bond of love, and you cannot track that, not with 1,000 bloodhounds, and you cannot break it, not with 1,000 swords. And then he screams at her, yanks at her hair, and locks her in her room, and then he runs to the Zoo of Death, which, to me, that whole passage was her saying, no balls.
Right.
No balls.
I mean, and then he proves her right, because what does he do? He becomes a violent asshole.
Yeah.
Throws her into her room, runs to the 5th level of the Zoo of Death, and then just takes the fucking controls and dials it up to 20 and kills them immediately.
Inigo and Fezzik figure out Humperdinck's plan while they are recovering Inigo.
Yeah,
like,
because
while they're helping Inigo recover, Inigo's like, yeah, no, there's no way the guy I fought was just a sailor. He is the Dread Pirate Roberts.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way. And I need him.
Yeah. And
so we're gonna go get him.
So then they hear the screaming. And they go running for the screaming, and I love that.
Well,
I love
the thing that the prince says to Wesley. She loves you. She loves you still, and you love her. So think of that. Think of this too. In all this world, you might have been happy, genuinely happy. Not one couple in a century has that chance. Not really, no matter what the storybooks say. And you could have had it. And so I would think no one will suffer a loss as great as you.
And then
he yanks it up to 20, which the Count screams not to 20.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because as far as the Count is concerned, this is just a waste. Like Wesley's no good to him, dead.
Yeah.
And this whole time,
like everyone hears it. Buttercup heard it.
Mm-hmm.
Yellen hears it. All the brutes hear it.
Yeah.
Inigo and Fezzik hear it.
And so Inigo and Fezzik, they go running towards the screaming.
And Inigo says, that is the sound of ultimate suffering. I know that sound. That was the sound in my heart when Count Rugen slaughtered my father and I saw him fall. The man in black makes it now. You think that's him? Who else has cause for ultimate suffering this celebration night?
Yeah.
Like,
So yeah, they go running to the castle, and I love how Inigo's like, Fezzik, move them. And so he does.
He screams, quiet!
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And they let him go.
Yeah.
And then Wesley's dead.
And then they find...
And the prince, after looking at Wesley, he says, she actually called me a coward. And then runs up the stairs.
Yeah.
Like he kills Wesley because Buttercup said, "You's a bitch."
Yeah. Yeah.
Say what you want about Humperdink. He does stand on business. He was not about to let that slide.
Yeah.
He is the ultimate op, as the kids say.
No, but I think that's just... I think that on a much smaller level, I see this crap all the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because I work in a school too. I'm not a teacher, but I work in a school, and I see these kids, they retaliate to the nth degree when the smallest slight is given them. And it's usually boys, honestly. It just be better, guys. Don't be like Humperdink.
Don't be like Humperdink.
But yeah, so we should talk about the albino.
The albino.
So this whole time,
Yellen's first cousin.
Did not remember that. So this entire chapter, when Wesley's getting tortured, there's this albino who is like in the background, and then like when everybody leaves and it's just him and Wesley, the albino would approach Wesley and be like, "Tell the truth.
Like
tell the truth. Whisper. Make it easier for yourself."
Which was such an interesting change from the book. With I don't remember the actor's name. But in the movie, when the albino first appears, he like speaks in this like decrepit little voice, and then he goes, "You're not getting out of here. There's no chance." And it's such an interesting change, which I think really serves for the tone of the movie. But in the book, it's just so fucking creepy. Yeah, because he's just whispering the whole time.
He's like, "You've got to tell the truth. It'll be easy. Make it easier for yourself." And so then, when he's dead, the albino has to go up to the shed and get a wheelbarrow. But the wheelbarrow's behind everything. And then Inigo and Fezzik are there, and they're like, Tell us where he is! Tell us where the sailor is!" And
he tells them.
He tells them, go through the front door. But you don't go through the front door. The front door is covered in traps. Mm-hmm. That's not the way into the Zoo of Death if you want to live.
Yeah.
And that's how the chapter ends. Really, it's with Fezzik and Inigo running into the Zoo of Death with no idea what is in store for them.
Yeah, none. So yeah, I love this chapter so much because we get so many great lines. We get so many great moments. There's moments about Goldman and his father reading the book, which
there is.
There's moments.
There's a few moments like those.
Like when he says Wesley dies, like he tells him Wesley dies. Like he tries to warn him.
Yeah, there's an interesting moment in the narrative where like it breaks off and then like Dad is like, oh, I've lost my place. And then like he starts reading and then Goldman's like, no, wait a minute. No. Hold on. You were talking about something else. And he's like, okay, listen, you're getting very invested.
You have pneumonia.
I saw how upset you got with Buttercup's nightmare. I'm not sure I want to tell you what happens in this bit. Will you trust me? Will you let me just continue on as I was? And he's like, no, tell me. And he's like, okay. Wesley dies.
What do you mean he dies?
I mean, he's dead.
Prince Humperdink kills him. He's only faking though, right? And he says, "Ah, shit," and starts to cry.
He's like, "What the hell, Dad? What
he
did
says,
you read
Jesus,
this?
Daddy, what did you read me this thing for?"
Yeah.
And he starts crying.
Yeah.
And so
I think he leaves it there.
He cries. No, he says, "Shall we go on tonight or not?" And he says, "Shoot. Fire when ready." With Inigo, "Let's hear the murder," I said. I knew I wasn't about to bawl again. Like Buttercup's, my heart was now a secret garden and the walls were very high. Like, it's so good. Because my mom did not warn me. She just was like, "And now he's dead." And I was like, and just started crying. And then she stopped again. She stopped for the night.
Yeah, you were crying.
I was sobbing. She was like, stopped. And so, like, I was like, imagine 3-year-old baby Cara, just eyes filled with tears.
She was just preparing you for the realities of life with this book, huh?
She was like, this bitch dead. Yeet. Like, deal with it. Deal with it how you will.
Oh
Wesley's dead. And I'm just like sitting there bawling my eyes out. Little 3-year-old baby Cara. I was inconsolable for an entire day.
Yeah.
Like, I was inconsolable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my grandma was like, "It's just a book." And I was like, no! It's not just a book!
No good book is just a book.
It's not just a book.
Yeah.
And so, like, when we finished that chapter, like, going into the Zoo of Death, I was like, he'll figure it out. Inigo is so smart. He'll figure it out. I love Inigo.
Yeah.
And then, like, we finished reading the book, but she was like, you reacted so poorly to that.
Yeah.
Like, you were just so sad.
You were 3.
Like, we were talking about it when I was older, and she was like, "Do you remember that first time?" And I was like, "Mom, I think it's one of the most vivid memories I have of being a toddler is you telling me that Wesley died. Like, you reading that portion to me. I think that's one of the most vivid memories I have. Because I remember what I was wearing.
You remember what you were wearing?
I was wearing a little pink nightgown because I was in bed. And I was, like, clutching my stuffies while she was reading to me. And I was holding my breath. And I remember I was, like, fiddling with the hem of my nightgown because I was really nervous. And then she read me that Wesley died. And I literally, like, grabbed the hem of my nightgown and buried my face in it and started sobbing. I was crying so hard.
Damn.
And my dad was like, "Damn it, Tammy."
You made her daughter cry.
Like, "Damn it, Tammy." Because he was in his bedroom, which my bedroom was right next to their bedroom. Yeah. And I just hear him, like, he was like, "You did not just read that part to her, Tammy." And she was like, "I did. She's getting the whole story." And he was like, "Tammy." Tammy Lynn Martin didn't raise no bitch. That's what I'll say. She did not shy away from any of that.
But she didn't read the whole thing to you. She cut out the italics.
She cut out the italics. She was like, the story is what matters.
Oh, I see.
But she read, like, she was like, she's getting the full, she's not getting treated with kid gloves here on this. She is getting the Goldman experience. And I was
Are we going to do that to our child?
Oh, God, no.
Okay, good.
I don't don't want to do that to our kids.
When should we read The Princess Bride to our kids?
Probably not when they're 3.
No, I agree. Not when they're 3.
Like 5 or 6 would be, I think, acceptable.
Okay.
Because then we can be like, hey, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's gonna be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But literally, I just remember hearing my dad go, oh, damn it, Tammy.
Damn it, Tammy. I love that.
While I'm like screaming and crying.
I can picture
about
him
this.
saying that too.
Like, damn it, Tammy. And she was like, the girl has to know. She needs to experience it. I'm not hiding it from her.
All right.
But yeah, so our last 2 chapters of this, and then we have Buttercup's baby.
Yes. So our next episode, we're going to do the last 2 chapters of the book. And then our final episode, we're going to do Buttercup's baby. Which is, so that is an explanation for Buttercup's baby. And then the first chapter and only chapter of Buttercup's baby. And
yeah.
I'm not going to get into that now, but those are going to be the final 2 episodes that we're going to be covering for this book. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you to Bidwest Studios for letting us use the space. Thank you to Jake Weller for doing our music. Thank you, Cara, for reading this book with me.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I'm just gonna keep plugging on. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye, guys.
Bye.